From its origins as a black and white indie comic to today, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles stands as one of the highest grossing media franchises of all time, thanks to its numerous comic book runs, cartoons, theatrical films, toy lines, and its loyal fan base. I never liked this series. Okay, I should specify, I don't hate this series, it's just that, well, I never liked it. I never got into it, which I find odd since on paper it had all of the elements of the other franchises that I loved growing up. It centers around a team of 4 color-coded ninjas with distinct personalities who just so happen to be cool anthropomorphic animals living amongst humans that fight supervillains in New York. And they also love pizza. Dude, I love pizza. We could practically be brothers. Yet despite all that, little LionDog took one look at this and said, I'd rather watch Caillou. Sure, maybe now that I've developed some tastes I would enjoy it, but at this point there's just so much content for this franchise ranging from comics to cartoons to movies to unfair NES games, each with their own style, continuity, and reception that it felt just too daunting to give it a go. I just accepted that I missed the Turtles train, until an unlikely hero convinced me to give the series a chance. Wade. To better explain, when Paramount Plus released the Knuckles series, I, being the Sonic film franchise apologist that I am, tuned into it. And before every single episode, I had to sit through the exact same TMNT commercial. I guess Paramount assumed that the Knuckles viewers shared a similar demographic to TMNT fans, but I find that hard to believe. No, Paramount, I do not want to watch a show about radical animals fighting supervillains. I wanted to go bowling! After seeing the commercial at least 6 times, I eventually decided to give in to the propaganda and watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's just one tiny issue. Which version? There are currently 5 cartoons in this franchise as of me making this video, all sporting their own art styles, storylines, and character interpretations, and I sure don't have time to watch all of them. I'm a busy guy! So instead of experiencing the entire platter of TMNT cartoons, I will instead be treating myself to a sampling of it all by watching the first episode of each cartoon iteration and deciding which series I want to watch in its entirety based on those 5 episodes. Now, before we go further, I want to clarify that my thoughts expressed on any of these shows are not my definitive opinions on them, merely my first impressions based on their pilots. A show is not made or ruined in its first episode, but to quote a certain animated warthog note on that one, first impressions are very important, especially when that first impression is competing with 4 other first impressions with the exact same premise. So without further ado, let's get started. You're watching The LionDog Show, and I'm watching every TMNT pilot as a franchise newcomer. It seems only fair to kick this off with the episode that started it all, 1987's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Episode 1, Turtle Tracks.
Crime. It's something we take for granted.
You usually say that about the environment. Or your friends. Not carjackings! This is April O'Neil, also known as every 80s boy's first crush, who is currently covering a series of robberies of technological equipment so advanced that not even a guy who works there knows what it all does. Despite not having a culprit pinned down, they speculate that they're ninjas based on sword markings and a rope. How do they know that the rope came from a ninja, you may ask?
Well, look for yourself. It's made in Japan.
Huh? After finishing the coverage, April and her film crew get cornered by some thugs, leading her to escape through the world's largest sewer drain where she is rescued by the Power Rangers. They were my second choice. Upon waking up from fainting, April finds herself in the team's sewer hideout where she meets the Turtles' master, Splinter. I can't wait to meet his master, Master Neck Pain from sleeping in an awkward position.
I was doing a story about a bunch of thefts at scientific equipment companies. Hey, I'm sitting here talking to a bunch of turtles.
Nothing gets past you, April. At this point, Splinter decides to explain his and the Turtles' backstory through a "there's this friend I have" story. He explains how he comes from Japan, where he used to be a well-respected warrior in a clan called the Foot. This all changed when his rival Shredder framed him. How exactly did he frame Splinter? He pinned Splinter to the wall with a knife so he couldn't bow to their master, and when he pulled out the knife it looked like an assassination attempt? This is like the ninja equivalent of pinning a cheat sheet on another student right when the teacher is about to look. Also, no one else notices this? I don't know, maybe they all hated Splinter. After this, Splinter flees to the sewers of New York when a child going who knows where drops a bowl full of turtles into the sewer for Splinter to find and raise until... they drank the grimace shit! Fortunately, it's just a mutagen that causes whoever comes into contact with it to fuse with whatever animal they previously touched. Since Splinter touched the turtles to clean them, the turtles become humanoids, and Splinter turns into... a rat. I don't know, maybe they just didn't want to use the turtles' toy mold for a 5th time. Seeing as he now has 4 humanoids to enslave, Splinter takes it upon himself to teach them his ninjutsu skills to keep them safe. And due to his love for the arts, he chose to name them after Renaissance artists. And with that, we finally have our team. Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo. Or as most of you know them as, Leo, Raph, Don, and Mikey. Or as I know them as, Leader, Jerk, Nerd, and Neurodivergent. Now with the exposition out of the way, April and the Turtles team up to track down those involved with the technology thefts.
We're not gonna find anything here.
find a clue leading them to a ninja-themed pizza parlor, so the five venture out into the New York streets to investigate, while also running into some odd civilians.
Relax, lady,
Upon arriving at the parlor, the turtles order some of the strangest pizzas I have ever heard.
1 sashimi pizza and 3 whipped cream pizzas.
Okay, a sashimi pizza, I can understand. After all, anchovies are a popular topping. But a whipped cream pizza? Do you mean pie? That's pie, just order a pie. Believe it or not, but these aren't even the strangest pizzas they've eaten. Throughout the episode, they also eat pizzas topped with jelly beans, peanut butter and anchovies, and bananas and sausage. I'm starting to think that the broccoli pizza from Inside Out isn't so far-fetched after all. Meanwhile, April's exploring this part of town when she stumbles upon a security service that turns out to be a front for the Foot Clan, now run by Shredder, using the company to rob their clients. But before she can get the truth out, the Foot Clan have arrived to abduct her. Once the turtles notice her absence, they follow her to an abandoned building by a trail of the contents of her purse. What purse? When attempting to save April, the turtles finally face off against the Foot Clan, where we discover that the clan is currently made up of robots, aka this show's way of getting away with violence without showing any blood. This revelation also begs the question of, why did Shredder have to usurp control of the Foot Clan if he could just build his own army? Start your own clan, Shredder! How about the Thigh? The five then follow the robots back to Shredder's base of operation, but once Shredder becomes aware of their infiltration, he quite literally floods them out. The team fortunately escapes the building just before the building collapses, most likely leading to the flooding of New York and the Turtles' home. I wonder if this is where the Riddler got the idea to flood Gotham and the Batman. Wait, did the Batman rip off the Ninja Turtles? There's just no originality in entertainment these days. Anyway, that's enough watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Let's move on to watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. 7 years after the conclusion of the original series came 2003's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a reboot that debuted on the Foxbox Saturday Morning Cartoons block, which later became... Oh, we are so screwed, aren't we? Well, let's see how screwed we are with Episode 1, Season 1. Things change. This episode begins in medias res with the Turtles being cornered by a street gang, an homage to the Turtles' debut comic.
What's with the dweeby costume? This ain't Halloween.
Speak for yourself, pal. You and your crew are all dressed up like you belong on a How to Draw Anime Characters book cover. After the opening, we rewind back to Splinter teaching the Turtles stealth.
Too noisy, Donatello. Too clumsy, Michelangelo. Poor choice, Raphael.
Why didn't Splinter tell Raph where he went wrong like he did with Dawn and Mikey? Not telling your students how to improve? Now that's a poor choice, Splinter. As punishment for his mediocre instructing, a slew of robotic baby dinosaurs invade the sewer, causing the roof to cave in and separating the Turtles from Splinter.
Master Splinter! No!
I don't think Leo is very happy right now. Fortunately, Dawn is able to reach him via his... shell cell. After Splinter gets done being a total boomer with his cell, they all agree to rendezvous at an abandoned drainage junction.
It's lucky this roof hasn't caved in.
You only just now notice that the roof caved in when it's right in front of you, Dawn? Maybe that's why you're wearing glasses of Mutant Mayhem. With their current path blocked, the group has no choice but to travel above the surface to reach their destination. When the truck parks over the manhole cover back to their paths cross with the purple dragons from the prologue.
No! Poor choice, Raphael.
Forget Splinter, everyone sucks at giving Raphael constructive criticism. How hard is it to say, hey Raph, next time don't hide in something with wheels? With the purple dragons driving the truck off to their next stop, the 3 remaining turtles tailed them from the rooftops.
Springtime fresh.
How exactly does he know what that smells like when he spent his whole life in a sewer? Cutting back to Splinter, he reaches the drainage junction only for the robots to reappear, causing the floor to cave in and leading Splinter to... heaven? Trust me, there's probably a fan theory out there for that. After freeing Raphael from the truck, we catch up with the prologue where the Turtles make light work of the gang, only then to be attacked by the Foot Clan, causing them to flee in the Purple Dragon's truck. During their getaway, they give the dragon's stolen money to a police car before driving off. And what do? Nothing. Once the Turtles arrive at the drainage junction, Splinter guides them to their new home in an abandoned subway station. What's stopping those robots from following them there? The episode then wraps up with who I assume to be Shredder lambasting the Purple Dragon's leader before presumably killing him. Let's all take a moment of silence to remember the former leader of the Purple Dragons, rejected shonen anime protagonist. Okay, the moment's over, let's watch the next cartoon. With Nickelodeon's acquisition of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise in 2009, came the debut of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 2012. How hard is it for these shows to have an original title? Hopefully something that won't be hard is watching this series' first episode, Rise of the Turtles Part 1. We're already giving this show an unfair advantage starting off with half a storyline. Right off the bat, you can see just how different this series looks when compared to the previous shows we watched. Being in my screen will do that to you. Not only that, but this is also the first and currently only TMNT series to be computer animated, helping it stand out from both its predecessors and also the cartoons that ran alongside it. The only other CGI animated series from that era that I can recall was... Okay, with the episode itself, we begin with a sparring sparring tournament between the 4 turtles, where we get a feel for not only the turtles' personalities, but also the show's unique blend of CG animation with 2D animation tropes, such as smear frames or anime-style symbols to display emotions. Afterwards, we learned that the Turtles and Splinter are celebrating the 15th anniversary of their mutation.
Tell us the story, Master Splinter.
Michelangelo, I have already told it many times.
Yeah, except now there's a franchise newbie who needs to hear our origins. Again! In this iteration, before becoming a rat, Splinter adopted the 4 turtles from a pet store, which I actually really like this deviation since it both streamlines events to make it sound less contrived, and sets up a stronger bond between Splinter and the turtles with him making a conscious choice to bring them into his life. On his way home, Splinter witnesses a sale of the Mutant Jet, and while fighting off both the buyer and the seller, both he and the turtles get exposed to the substance, transforming them into who we know now. Seeing as they're older, the turtles ask if they can visit the surface world for the first time, which I have a feeling that this is a common plot point throughout every iteration. And Splinter responds with the yes but actually no meme, eventually agreeing to it as a means of giving them some proper experience.
Make sure you go before you leave. The restrooms up there are filthy.
Sensei!
Hey, don't sensei him, he's right! Once they reach the surface at night, they explore the streets and scare this delivery guy, causing him to drop his pizza. And what does Mikey do with it?
He stole that guy's pizza!
I don't know about you, but that pizza looks pathetic. Look how it sags, this is like the anti-anime food. I'll give them credit though, they're at least not eating a pizza that's an Italian hate crime. Upon further exploration, the turtles run into— oh my goodness! Did we just switch to an early episode of Code Lyoko? Please. Please don't tell me that's April. I don't want to potentially be looking at that for 4 seasons. However, if Dawn is any indicator, I'm alone on this.
She's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen.
Someone get this poor turtle an issue of Playboy. I've seen prettier women in Pakistani McDonald's commercials. Luckily, I don't have to look at April much longer as she and her presumed father get kidnapped by a bunch of identical mutant men in business suits. Calling it now, they're all robots. The turtles try to rescue them, however, their inability to cooperate leads to the abductors escaping in the van, with the exception of one who Naruto chases Mikey into an alley where he discovers that the man is indeed a robot. The robot reveals a brain-like alien inside who briefly lashes onto Mikey, but when he tries to show the others this, both the alien and the robot are nowhere to be found. Back in the sewer, Splinter makes the decision to anoint a leader to better their teamwork, and after giving the choice to much-needed soul-searching,
It's Leonardo.
the following night, the turtles stake out an alley, which Leo chose since the graffiti on the wall matches the design of the van. Poor choice, Leo. For all you knew, it could have been a brand or a cool design like the S symbol or Kilroy was here. Fortunately, for the sake of the plot, the van eventually shows up, and when the turtles confront the driver, no matter the continuity, the Second Amendment will always be a part of the TMNT canon. After our second rooftop chase of a vehicle, they crash the van with a throwing star. When investigating the van, they discover—
Mom?
wait, are you telling me that the DuckTales reboot got the ending for its first episode from the ending of this TMNT reboot's first episode? What's next? Ben Schwartz playing the blue member of the group? Our next stop on this radical reptile retrospective brings us to what might be the most controversial iteration of the series to date, 2018's Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This series debuted in less than a year after the previous one concluded, and even though I wasn't following the fandom at the time, I was still aware of the strife against the show for changing designs, changing established roles, and especially changing characters' personalities. However, years after its reveal and release, it has developed a cult following, so I'm not going to write it off just yet. Rise's first episode, Mystic Mayhem, kicks off with a cat running from 2 guys before teleporting away. Why didn't the cat just do that earlier? Well, if so, we wouldn't have the 2 guys tiptoeing past miniature flags, and the world would be a worse place without that! We get introduced to this iteration of the Turtles taking out a shady business arrangement before jumping into a pool. On their way home, Raph notices his cat at an abandoned construction site, and while getting to know it, the 2 thugs from earlier arrive and reveal themselves as mythical creatures. After the fight that destroys most of the turtles' weapons, the creatures abduct the cat, escaping through a portal through which April follows them. In an attempt to rescue both April and the cat, Mikey recognizes the symbol that the portal left behind as the same one on one of Splinter's old artifacts. When trying to ask him to borrow it, we get introduced to this version of Splinter, who is the polar opposite of the previous 3 variations of him. While the original 3 were assertive and disciplined, this iteration is apathetic and lazy, and instead of being tall and slim, he looks like the kind of character who someone would post a picture of him on social media with the caption, "Hear me out." Despite having the artifact, Raph is unable to open the portal until Mikey uses it to draw the symbol, which successfully reopens the portal. Why none of the others thought to redraw the symbol is beyond me. And with that, the turtles enter the Hidden City, where they reunite with April and discover Baron Draxum stealing the vial from the cat and using it to create the mutagen that gets injected into mosquitoes. The turtles are apprehensive about taking action without their weapons, until Raph reminds them that they don't need their weapons to be ninjas. challenges. They just need April to show them where they can find the special magical weapons. Okay, I'm not saying that they ripped off Ninjago, but I am going to say they plagiarized it. The five confront the Baron while also getting acquainted with the powers of their weapon. This all culminates with the turtles, April, and the cat returning to New York alongside the mosquitoes with the mutagen escaping into the city. Looks like New York is in for some mutant mayhem. Oh hey! And with that, we've reached the most recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series, 2024's Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a continuation of the film Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, which I have not seen as to keep all 5 shows on an even playing field, so fingers crossed I'm not missing out on too much jumping in here blind. The first episode, Leonardo Stands Alone, kicks off with what I can only assume is the ending of the film where the general audience lauds the turtles as heroes. We move over to the sewers where Leo turns down going out with his brothers to work on his comic book.
We're getting breakfast. Bacon, egg, and cheese.
I honestly can't tell if they're referring to a fast food breakfast or the toppings for their pizza. I'm leaning towards the former. Eggs aren't nearly as gross for them to put on pizza. After the theme song, we see the beginning of Leo's comic, which makes me question just how canon this show is to the film franchise, as the Turtles are heading out for a costume party on account of April inviting them. I'm glad to see TMNT following the trend of vaguely Halloween parties started by Arthur. Plans change, however, when Don gets a notification on his phone about a mutant sighting, so the team take a brief detour to solve the issue before heading off to the party. What on earth could go wrong? We don't see the entirety of what went down, but judging by Leo being alone in a garbage bin, it's safe to say that this wasn't the Turtles' finest hour. In the alley, Leo encounters the prototype Emmy from Metroid Dread that chases him until Leo lands a lucky throwing star shot that damages its lens, using that as an opportunity to hide. After seeing a billboard promoting the writers behind Toy Story 5, Leo gets the idea to use April's phone to find his brothers. Meanwhile, the Emmy wanders into a convenience store to steal its security camera's lens. While installing it, what are the odds that Leo jumps over the exact alley the Emmy is hiding in right as it installs its new lens? Once Leo meets up with April outside the party, aka the writers finding out how many pop culture references they can cram into this episode, he details a somewhat slanted recollection of how the notifications led the Turtles to a harbor to find a newly discovered mutant. However, this turned out to be a trap set by a woman named Bishop to exterminate the Turtles alongside the rest of mutant kind with her robots. Unfortunately for Leo, April left her phone at the party, and double unfortunately for both of them, the Emmy followed him and chases the two through the complex. During the chase, we get some oddly specific jokes, which I can only assume are callbacks to the movie. The two of them get separated by the Emmy, leaving Leo to fight out on the fire escape while April retrieves her phone. Okay, I can buy mutant humanoid turtles, but I refuse to believe that not a single couple is making out in that empty room at a high school party. The fight goes into the office where Leo tracks Dawn to Times Square, and after April fixes the Emmy and showers it, Leo defeats it.
Not bad for someone who's nothing without his brothers.
Okay, April, don't patronize him. You know you did most of the work. We then end on a scene in Bishop's hideout where we learn that Leo isn't the only one surviving on his own. Kind of a grim way to end this marathon with all our heroes alone and in over their heads, but hey, I didn't write this episode. Okay, now that we've gotten a taste of what to expect from every TMNT cartoon, let's review them side by side to determine which one I enjoyed the most. While it isn't the be-all end-all of any cartoon, animation does play a major role in the success of an action-oriented show, so let's start there. It comes to no one's surprise that the original series from the 80s is quite weak in this aspect, but I don't know, I feel that it still holds a certain level of charm thanks to it being the only animated series on cells. The faded oranges and greens really give the show such a fun and friendly feeling to it, and some of the flaws of the cheap dated animation mesh well with a show that's all about being weird. Like, look at this shot with April, her eyes are in their own little world. Despite this, the actual action scenes we got did feel a little underwhelming. Also, outside of the mutants, the humans looked pretty generic and could be placed in any other show of that era. And that issue carries over to the 03 series as well, except it no longer has the charming cell animation and bright colors to carry it. It's not a bad color palette, but something about the show's art style feels like it's trying way too hard to be cool. However, the action scenes are much more interesting. When compared to the previous two, the 2012 series is the first one to feel like it has its own style, though that does feel like a technicality since there weren't as many CGI shows at the time. While it does have the blend of 2D elements to back it up, this is definitely the show that has aged the least gracefully animation-wise. While I thought that the designs of the mutants looked surprisingly good, all of the human designs looked 5 years behind them. I will give the show's look this: they did give each turtle subtle physical differences to help them stand out beyond their colors and weapons, such as Raphael having a blockier head to showcase his rough personality, and Dawn having a bigger forehead to represent his intelligence. Of course, Rise would take this this idea and truly run with it by making the turtles each a different breed, which helps them stand out just by their silhouettes far more than with the 2012 series, and especially the first two. I'm honestly surprised that this idea wasn't done sooner, but maybe the earlier showrunners wanted to stick to the team being biological brothers than merely figurative ones. Outside of the character designs, this show has the best animation I've seen thus far. Bold colors and art style, and creative action that will only get better once the turtles master their weapons. Say what you will about the series, but it definitely isn't afraid to stand out. If I had to complain about one thing with Rise's animation, it's that the animation did get a bit too fast-paced to where it became hard to keep track with what was happening. But fortunately, Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would fix this with its energetic action that is a bit more subdued when compared to its predecessor. Tales easily takes the cake for me in terms of having the best animation, as it takes the style of Rise while seamlessly fusing it with the crude yet visually appealing look of an amateur comic. While the 2012 Turtles' differences were too subtle and Rise's were too drastic for some people, Tales feels like the perfect balance of sticking to a unified look while also giving each turtle its own unique physicality. This is also the best take on New York. It truly feels like a lived-in city, a far cry from the 2012 depiction which just looks like an empty toy set, though that could just be due to the limited nature of CGI set design. Well, it's a good thing that there's no limited nature to storytelling, for the most part. While I wasn't expecting much from the first series, I was pleasantly surprised by how well it held up to today's standards. The tone of it reminded me a lot of Power Rangers. That must be why these franchises tend to cross over often. To kids, it comes off as a serious epic, while adults see it as a cheesy parody of action-adventure stories. Certain plot points such as the Japanese rope and Shredder's framing of Splinter clearly show the writers weren't taking this too seriously despite the overarching plot, which is also something I wasn't expecting this show to have. I'm so used to shows of this era being simple one-off adventures that seeing loose ends at the episode's conclusion surprised me. I also thought it was clever to center the episode around April. With a concept as bizarre as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the audience definitely needs a character who can ask questions about the world and its characters. However, the plot was bogged down by some plot holes. For example, why does Splinter turn into a rat when he last touched the turtles? Or why does April suddenly have a purse only when it's necessary to the plot? And no, not wanting to animate it is not an excuse.
I'd know that Wada used chewing gum anywhere.
You met her an hour ago. Outside of those issues, it was a memorable start to the series, which is more than I can say about the 2003 version's first episode. I thought the opening training session was a great way to establish everyone's personality traits. Well, except for Raphael, who really made the poor choice their writers. Outside of that, nothing really stuck out to me as all that interesting. I understand that the purple dragon fight was meant to be an homage to the original comic, but it felt kind of forced to me. They tried to pull the classic adaptation technique of connecting certain plot points by having the gang work for Shredder, but if his foot soldiers were there, why not just send them to do his bidding and cut the less experienced middlemen out of the equation? The only reason for them to be there is to evoke some nostalgia. Also, Splinter's lesson of change felt really random. It gave me the impression that they'll try to force some sort of moral at the end of every episode where Splinter is over by Cordy to talk about what we learned today. And again, what's stopping those robots from following them into the train station? If they could follow Splinter to the drainage junction, why couldn't they track the 5 there? Maybe I would be less harsh on this episode if it weren't for the fact that the 2012 incarnation's first episode is essentially a better version of it. They both begin with the turtles practicing their ninjutsu before venturing into the surface world. Not only does the sparring show how each turtle behaves along with how they interact with each other, but I also honestly prefer them having no reason to visit the surface world than them being forced to leave. After all, they're teenagers. Of course they want a little independence and want to visit the surface world. They're a bunch of scaly little Ariels. The only thing I didn't like was the heavy exposition of Splinter and the turtles' backstory. I get that they didn't have an outsider like April for them to explain their origins, but they could have made it sound a bit more natural, like Splinter loving to tell them the story even though the turtles are sick of it at this point. Hey, at least there's some backstory, something Rise's first episode could have used. If there is one thing I can praise about this episode's story, it's that I did like the implications that this show would have more of a fantasy emphasis than a science fiction one, which I found to be refreshing after 3 episodes of the same old, same old. Outside of that, I didn't find much to enjoy about this episode's story. If the 2003 show felt too cool, then Rise felt too goofy. It felt like every time they hinted at something cool, it would turn out to just be set up for a joke. I wouldn't mind the show being more comedic if it were actually more comedic, but the bait and switch style of humor just disappointed me more often than made me exhale through my nose. With the moment where Raphael reminded the others of their training and that they didn't need their weapons to fight, I got excited to see the turtles rely on stealth to defeat the Baron. You know, like ninjas. Then April just barges in to tell them about the weapons room because that's funnier, I guess. Luckily, Tales felt like a return to a comedic tone that could still get serious at points. This is easily the show that storyline shocked me the most. Since this is a companion show to a movie, I assumed this would be like one of those DreamWorks Netflix shows where it's merely an episodic show that's either a prequel to the film or far removed from the film with a completely different setting and characters. But it actually delivers a single continuing storyline that takes place right where the film concluded. The comic book frame device also helps the show toe the line between a canonical event in the Mutant Mayhem continuity and a non-essential side story while also doubling as an homage to where the franchise started. However, while I am impressed with the serious, overarching plot, the creativity of the comic book framing device made me wish that the series was just fanfiction made by the Turtles that embraced the unadulterated passion and sheer stupidity of teenagers writing self-insert stories, and it would have stories that are just weird and idealized enough to have viewers press X to doubt, but are plausible enough in the established universe that it would fit the MM canon. But that's just me. Moving to the plot itself, I enjoyed the idea of splitting up the Turtles, as up to this point for me, they've always been a package deal. I've come to expect how these guys would behave as a team, but giving each of them their own trials to face gives me a taste of how they would work on their own. However, I felt that April helping Leo defeat the robots so much kind of undermined the plot of Leo gaining confidence in his own abilities. I know the high school setting is a bit divisive for most longtime fans, but I thought it fit the teenage aspect that I felt has been largely ignored up to this point, but I'll go into that later. What didn't fit, or rather fit too well, was the cavalcade of forced pop culture references. So this must be how people feel about Movie Sonic's pop culture references. Not only were they unfunny, but they make this easily the most dated iteration of the show. Maybe I was too harsh on Cell Shell. It'll be interesting to see how well the show ages, as the topical jokes nail it down as an early 2020 series, but nowadays many people look back on works that are of their era, in a non-problematic way, as fun time capsules where their datedness adds to their charm. So it's possible that the Mutant Mayhem version of the series could receive that kind of love in hindsight. With that being said, a story is nothing without the characters who surround it, and for both the original show and Rise, my biggest complaint centered around the Turtles themselves. In both iterations, they all sort of blend together. If it were for the original show's opening, I wouldn't know any of their personalities. Raph is supposed to be the one who makes all the snarky remarks, yet the rest of them do the same. And Mike is supposed to be the goofy one, but they're all goofy, and he's simply goofier. At the very least, I'm aware of his presence. With Rise's over-the-top comedic tone spreading to all the characters, it almost makes Mikey feel obsolete. Leo is just as goofy as him, if not more. There's even a moment where Leo makes a lame joke and Mikey responds with, "Really, Leo?" I may be new to this series, but I can tell you that exchange sounds like something you'd hear on Opposite Day. Mikey was the one to recognize the symbol and draw it on the wall, which makes me wonder if he'll be kind of the idea guy like Sokka from Avatar, but at the same time, shouldn't that be Donnie? Granted, these are the first episodes, one being the first in the entire franchise, and the other being a very different take on said franchise, so maybe both episodes focus more on introducing the concept of the team with the individual team members being fleshed out in later episodes. With that being said, the 2003 version was a vast improvement over the original series in terms of differentiating the Turtles, but much like most aspects of the 03 series, they are done much better in the 2012 show. However, this might be due to the more expressive animation and better voice acting. From what little we see of all four of them in Tales' first episode, this might be my favorite version of the Turtles since for the first time, they truly felt like teenagers. Throughout most of these shows, I could never buy them as teenagers. Maybe early college students if I squint my eyes. For real, how on earth do you expect me to believe that the 2003 versions are teenagers? They all have dad bods, for crying out loud! The closest we've gotten up to this point were the 2012 versions with them wanting more independence and watching cartoons. In Tales, they perfectly translate the Turtles' personalities into what they would be if they were 14-year-olds of today. They're awkward, they're quick to trash talk on each other, and they're kind of annoying. They're modern teens, warts and all. And while they may not be everyone's cup of tea, I found that these Turtles truly lived up to the franchise's name. With all the other aspects covered, I'm left with only one question. What happens next? Which show made me most want to watch the next episode? And once again, the 03 version fails to impress. Look, I am sorry to anyone who considers the 03 show the best Turtles cartoon, but it just didn't give me anything intriguing that the other shows didn't already give me. Sure, we learn about Shredder at the end, but it's a Ninja Turtles show. Bowser's in a Mario game? The only interesting plot thread were the robots and finding out where they originated. One hope I have for the show is that killing off the Purple Dragons as leader doesn't mean the end of the game. It could be interesting having a third party interacting with our designated heroes and villains and switching sides depending on when it benefits them. Even the 80s show set up more plot points. I know enough about this series to know that this gang member eventually becomes Bebop, and we don't see the Technodrome that Shredder mentions. I wonder what it could look like. Oh, it's just the Death Star on wheels. That's it. Despite having my issues with it, the first episode of Rise left a ton of loose ends that did leave me curious. Baron mentions that he and the Turtles are on the same team. Did he mean that in terms of mutants in general, or them specifically? Is he aware that they were trained by Splinter? Come to think of it, where did Splinter get the watch? Did he know the Baron in his past? Perhaps the rest of his artifacts could tell us more about his history. On the other hand, the mosquitoes escaping felt a lot like a setup for a Monster of the Week formula. I am really worried that most of this show will have a repetitive nature of fighting someone who got turned into a mutant and either curing them or helping them adjust to mutant life. I just hope that this formula won't eclipse the potential plot lines. If you want to talk mysteries, the 2012 series delivers them in spades. What are the aliens doing with the mutagen? Why do they need April? Will the alien latching onto Mikey affect him in any way? Most importantly, what does Splinter's photo mean? I did read the first TMNT comic, so I am familiar with what this could be foreshadowing, but it could be different for this adaptation since Splinter was originally human in this version, unlike in the original comic. Will there still be the love triangle involving Shredder's brother, or will it just be Shredder to simplify things? I also do remember Shredder's owner having a child in the original comic, and they wouldn't add a baby for no reason. Maybe they're setting up Shredder raising the child as his own after killing his mother and Splinter fleeing, and the Turtles have to fight his son. Who knows at this point? Well, except for the people who've already watched this show. Watch, Splinter's going to be the baby in the photo. I've been speculating for nothing. There's also the growth of the team as they're still new to fighting together. The sparring match did set up a rivalry between Leo and Raph, so it will be interesting to see how that tension affects the group. While Tails doesn't give us that much to ponder, what it does give is interesting. I like that so far we don't know the full context of what happened at the harbor, only Leo's biased recollections. It could be interesting if in each subsequent episode you hear another perspective on the events until finally learning the full context near the end. You also have the other three dealing with their own trials. What will they be facing? Based on the first episode, we also don't know much about Bishop and much less about her assistant. What's motivating them to eliminate mutants? What, did a mutant tell Bishop that she was too small and lowly to learn ninjutsu? One downside is since this is a small scale story in a larger film franchise, I doubt that we'll get many TMNT staples as they'll want to save them for future films. While not a big issue for longtime fans, for someone who's looking for a good encapsulation of this franchise, it might mean that this won't be my first choice. Okay, now that I've covered everything, let's rank these episodes. In dead last, we got the 2003 TMNT episode. While it's not a bad episode by any means, all of its improvements over the 87 show are executed much better in the other episodes, and what only it offers didn't interest me all that much. Speaking of which, just ahead of the 03 show is the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pilot. While archaic when compared to its successors, its retro feel and cheesy storylines make it a show I wouldn't mind revisiting. At the number 3 spot, we have Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. While I wasn't a fan of the more comedic tone or the interchangeable personalities of the Turtles, the mysteries they allude to give me hope that this show merely got off on the wrong foot. In a very close second, we have Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. While it doesn't set up a vast series, the more serious and contained story it begins did leave me captivating and wanting more. Lastly, winning the top spot, rather unfairly, is 2012's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Based on its first episode, it looks like it takes a little bit of what I liked about all of the other 4 shows to create a series that I cannot wait to dive into. Now, I just want to say that, even though I like some of these episodes more than others, I enjoyed all of the episodes that I watched, and I can see why every iteration has its fans. I know with franchises that have gone through a lot of drastic changes throughout countless years, it's easy to be defensive about what you believe to be the golden age. But I don't get why we have to turn being a fan of something into a contest. That's not to say you're wrong if you think that the newer shows are annoying or if you think the older shows are boring. You're not morally obligated to enjoy everything from your favorite franchises. But that doesn't mean you should shame someone for preferring certain shows over others or claim that they're not real fans. It's important to remember that every iteration is someone's introduction to the franchise. Do you really think insulting people for starting with Rise will convince them to check out the Ninja Turtles that you like? It's not like it's impossible for them to enjoy the old iterations. If they're fans of the series at all, they might explore the classic incarnations if longtime fans give them the chance to do so. It's like Mikey said,
sometimes you get farther with a smile and a kind word.
Also, expecting a franchise all about being cool not to change with the times is like going to a water park and expecting not to get wet. Every era has its own definition of cool, so of course the different shows will reflect that. Despite this, no matter how the series is wrapped, it's still about a group of 4 teenage ninjas who love pizza. Throughout every show that I watched, it never felt like I wasn't watching something with that exact same concept. It's a concept that will never not be cool, it's a concept with so many possibilities that these shows all take in its own direction, and it's a concept that now has a new fan. Man, despite watching quite a bit of the series, I still feel like I'm only scratching the surface with this franchise. I still don't know anything about Casey Jones, Bebop and Rocksteady, Baxter Stockman, or that Samurai Rabbit. There is so much time and so little to see. Wait a minute, strike that, reverse it. I'm up for anything at this point. I could watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 Turtles in Time. Poor choice, me. You've been watching The LionDog Show. Have a great day, and stick around for more.